think that's a good place to put it. Maybe I will button this up while I am at it and get things. Okay, so before we begin, very funny story about Bob's Burgers. I saw the premiere episode years ago on the night it premiered, not live. I did record it. And when I was watching the Bob's Burgers premiere episode, I was eating a Carl's Jr. burger as what I was eating for dinner when I was watching the premiere of Bob's Burgers. And so ever since then, Carl's Jr. has always been what Bob's Burgers tastes like to me. So we are going to eat a burger while we discuss the movie. I've got my burger, I've got my Coke Zero, and this should be a fun one. So anyway, hey everyone, this is Kevin, the film critic for iCritic.net, and welcome to my channel. This is a live stream of my reactions to the Bob's Burgers movie, which I actually got to see tonight. And as mentioned, I do have a burger, so that I'm not going to be eating throughout the, not going to be chewing on food while I review. That would just be disgusting. But, in memory of Bob's Burgers, I did want to have a burger. Granted, this is not the exact burger that I ate when I first saw Bob's Burgers. It was a big cheeseburger. They apparently don't have that anymore, so I got the double Western bacon cheeseburger. It's a lot of food though, so I'm going to cut it in half before we get started. Also, I'm not much of an onion ring person, so I think I'm going to take those onion rings off. Anyway, I see we have a couple people in the chat. Welcome, welcome. So happy you could join us tonight as we discuss this movie that isn't opening until Friday. And so some of you might be asking, well, how did I get to see? I forgot how gooey these burgers were. That might have been like the one little mistake in this whole plan. How did I get to see the Bob's Burgers movie early? Well, one of the perks of being an AMC investor, they do these investor screenings for various movies. Never for things like Marvel movies or things like that, but for other movies that they think could use a little bit of a boost in the word of mouth. They tend to screen sometimes as much as 2 weeks early. And when they screen it early, obviously you get to see the movie and then you can talk about it. They're usually cleared at that point for people to discuss them online or on their blogs. So that is what we are going to do. There we go. So I'm going to put one half back in the wrapper so I can save it. Fizzig. The movie didn't look great, but the show was pretty funny. And yeah, we'll talk about that because, the funny thing about this movie is that they've kind of done a very good job of hiding what it's actually about and what goes on in it. So anyway, there we go. Oh, hold on. I've kind of come to appreciate a taste for Coke Zero. Anyway, allow me a moment to indulge in a bite of meat, cheese, and bacon from Carl's, and then we will discuss the movie. That's a Bob's Burger for you right there. All right, I'm not gonna do that throughout the whole thing. I just did it for the thumbnail. Anyway, so yeah, the Bob's Burgers movie. So what is the Bob's Burger movie about? Because I know a lot of people said, really, a Bob's Burgers movie? Well, what's it going to be about? Because, it's kind of a low-key show. I mean, I don't think that's an insult to the show by any means. The show is funny and it's heartfelt. You love the family dynamics. Bob's always trying to keep the burger place afloat. But realistically, what could the movie do that would justify it being on the big screen and be worth paying for? Well, in that regard, you may be disappointed in the movie, or maybe the movie will be exactly what you want it to be, because the movie is basically a extended Bob's Burger movie with at least one major storyline element that you probably couldn't do in 30 minutes of the TV show. So, if you've watched Bob's Burgers, the show, you know that the show is basically about Bob Belcher and his family. They run a business called Bob's Burgers. He's got eccentric kids, a happy-go-lucky wife, and he's always struggling to basically make his burger business a huge success, with pretty much having just two regular customers, Teddy and that other guy whose name I can never quite remember, but he's got the glasses and the black coat. Anyway, so that's the story of the Bob's Burgers movie opens with basically Bob and Linda needing an extension on a loan, which is nothing new. If you've watched the show, you know that this is a pretty regular problem that occurs, but usually they can get loans and rent extended or forgiven basically by making a really good burger and handing it to that person. Well, in this case, the person who is in discussion that they talk to, I should say, to get the loan extended is a guy who is not much of a meat eater. He's trying to cut back on meat, and so Bob can't just give a wonderful burger to this person to get them to extend the loan. And so they have 7 days to pay the loan, or else their burger equipment will be confiscated by the bank. So, this is pretty typical for a Bob's Burgers storyline. That's just what it is. The movie does have some musical numbers, and most of the songs are really catchy. In fact, dare I say it, they are much catchier than they usually are in the show. Are they catchy enough to get an Oscar nomination? Probably not, but they are catchy enough to be fun. But there you go. What else about it? Let's see here. Sorry, I did this I forget that I'm live. I did this to do the cut, but no, I'm live. Also in the movie, there is a storyline about Tina wanting to ask Jimmy Jr. to be her summer boyfriend. That is another reoccurring theme in the TV show, that she has a crush on the neighbor's son, which causes conflicts between her and her dad because Bob does not like Jimmy Pesto, but Jimmy Pesto Jr. Tina does like, and she wants him to be her summer boyfriend, and she wants to give him a locket. This is not going to surprise fans of the show. Also, Gene wants to play his strange music on the stage in the amusement park wharf. That's also not unusual. And Louise has been called a baby on the schoolyard, and she wants to basically prove that she's not a baby, and she's being called a baby because she wears those pink ears, which I like, of course, and she looks good, but now kids on the schoolyard are asking, why is she still wearing the ears and everything? So there you go. So anyway, all of this is pretty typical Bob's Burger material. What might not be something that you would normally see on the TV show is the main plot where there is a big sinkhole that appears in front of Bob's business. Now, this creates two problems. The first problem is that it blocks the door so that people can't get in to Bob's restaurant. So he starts resorting to other potential means to sell his burgers, like getting a shopping cart and actually going into the wharf to sell burgers, even though he does not have a license to do so. But the other major plot comes from the fact that in that sinkhole, there are the bones of a dead body and a bullet in the chest. And so now the cops have matched the bullet with that of a gun that their landlord has. And so they arrest the Belchers' landlord for murder. Now, this is a problem for the Belchers because their landlord is pretty forgiving with them about the rent. He lets them extend their rent. Sometimes they don't have to pay. So, I believe it was a main point in the first or second season where they needed to convince the landlord to let them stay, even though they're not the best tenants in the world. And they do so by letting him have a burger. And I remember he was like, "Oh, you're not a businessman. You are an artist with buns and meat." So yes, you can stay, but I'm going to raise the rent, and we're going to go from month to month instead of a lease. So I remember that was like a big thing, and so now there's always like a constant conflict in the show about him wanting to how should I no how should I, of him basically forgiving the Belchers for what for their lack of payment, I should say. So obviously this is bad news for the Belchers because he extends the rent or he forgives it some months, and so Luis sets out to prove that their landlord is innocent and not guilty of murder. And that's basically the main storyline of the Bob's Burgers movie. You're probably not going to see any of that in the previews. The previews, which I've actually seen the previews for the Bob Burgers movie, and I don't normally watch previews, but I was just a little bit curious on this one, and when I watched the previews, it really didn't tell me much about what this movie was about, and so going in, it was basically a complete surprise. Now, like I said, at the core, it is a Bob's Burgers movie, except now there is a murder mystery in the center of everything. So that's I don't know how Bob's Burgers fans are going to feel about that. I mean, excuse me, since there's not another person watching at this exact moment, I'm going to take another bite. Mm. Gotta love, gotta love a Bob's Carl's Jr. burger. Anyway, now that said, all right, so there's a murder mystery in the middle of the Bob's Burgers pop. Otherwise, it really does feel like an extended episode of the TV series. Like I said, all of the Bob's Burgers, all of the Bob's Burgers the storytelling staples of Bob's Burgers are all there. Business in trouble, kids getting into mischief, Bob gets depressed, Linda builds him up. The biggest difference is truly the murder mystery and the whodunit. And of course, it's not much of a mystery, and I don't think you would want a Bob's Burgers movie to be much of a mystery. It really is pretty easy to figure out, and the main focus of the movie is always going to be the humor and the family dynamics. And that's where the Bob's Burgers movie really shines. It is a very funny movie. It's got that deadpan, sarcastic humor that I love so much, where basically one person like over exaggerates something and the other person has to basically be the straight man to the craziness. And Bob is usually the straight man to the crazy world that is around him. And that's preserved here. Although I have to say, Bob is kind of a supporting player in this movie. In many ways, Louise is the main star. She's got the main conflict of wanting to grow up, not being considered a kid anymore. And she's the one who realizes that, hey, if we don't help out our landlord, then our store could go away, our restaurant, and we could be homeless and living in a box. So we got to prove him innocent. And Bob's kind of a passive player in this movie until the last 30 minutes or so. Now, when the last 30 minutes comes around, there are some action sequences. There's this very interesting chase scene underneath the pier, and there's this actually really intense scene in the climax. I don't really want to give it away, but it involves the hole and dirt, and it's actually kind of intense for a Bob's Burgers movie. I didn't really expect it to be that intense for that scene. But otherwise, and actually, it's not even Bob that really saves the day. Luis saves the day. So I might be giving away too much by saying that. But yeah, so this is. It's funny. It's called the Bob's Burgers movie, but it really is more about Luis. Bob is, in many ways, a supporting character in this movie. Now, that said, is it worth seeing? Well, yes, it absolutely is worth seeing. Is it worth paying to see? That's a little bit more of a difficult question to answer. You know, when I kind of compare it to something like, say, the Simpsons movie, it's definitely the Simpsons movie was definitely worth paying to see in the big screen. The Bob's Burgers movie is not as good as that. On the other hand, when you think about a movie like, say, Jetsons the movie, which just wasn't very good at all, then yes, the Bob's Burgers movie is definitely better than that. I mean, I think if you're a big Bob's Burgers fan, I think it's a pretty easy recommendation. If you're not a huge Bob's Burgers fan, I don't think you're going to dislike it. I think you will like it. I mean, they really did go out of their way to make sure that you didn't have to know anything before going into this movie and watching it. Excuse me. That said, would I recommend someone who's not a fan of Bob's Burgers to go on out and see it on a blind whim? That's a little bit more of a tricky question. I mean, it's. I mean, I would say stream a couple episodes on Hulu first. If you like what you see on the TV show, then yeah, the movie's pretty easy to recommend. If you don't like what you see on the TV show, then that's pretty much what you're going to get with this movie. So it might not be worth seeing. This is actually one of those movies that is pretty review proof. It really doesn't matter what the critic says. It only matters if you've seen the show and what you think about it. Unlike the Simpsons movie and maybe Beavis and Butthead 2 America, where I think those movies are better than their TV shows, and I could recommend those even to fans who, or I should say to people who aren't fans of the TV series. The Bob's Burgers movie is the show is pretty much the show on the big screen. Now, there's also something nice that it's kind of cool to see a 2D hand-drawn film that's not an anime in theaters again. That's brand new. That's always a treat in my opinion. So I almost want to say go see it just to support the craft itself. But if you don't like Bob's Burgers, the show, you're not going to like the Bob's Burgers movies. So where do I land on this with the grade? Well, in my print review, which will be going out later this week on iCritic.net, there'll be a link below when it goes up. I give the Bob's Burgers movie 3.5 stars. It's definitely a very enjoyable movie, especially for fans of just good humor in general, and particularly the Bob's Burgers TV show. If you don't like to laugh, or if maybe the TV show just never was your thing, I don't think the movie's really going to change your mind on that. This definitely seems like it was made for the fans, even if in some ways it was made so that non-fans could also watch it. But that's kind of just my opinion anyway. Yeah. So anyway, would like to know what you all think about that. Comment below, like, favorite, share. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one. All right. With that out of the way, now I can take all of that and edit it into a much more compact review later on this week. Let's see what's going on with the comments. See who's here. So we have FizzGig. The movie didn't look great, but the show was pretty funny. Yeah, that's that's kind of my thoughts. I mean, the movie is pretty good. And hey, remote tripod. Yeah, if you like the show, you're going to very much like the movie. It's really not that different. The only thing that's really different, of course, is the murder mystery. I don't recall there ever being a murder mystery on the show. Not that I've seen every episode of Bob's Burgers. I've seen most of the episodes. I definitely saw the one with the chinchilla, but Bob's Burgers is usually a pretty low-key show. This movie is pretty low-key. There is an extended action sequence upon like a roller coaster tracks, but it's not like the most whiz-bang example of great animation or high-stakes action. But it still contains the deadpan humor from Bob, and so it is fun in that regard. Gotta love it. Anyway, now we can talk about whatever we want. Whatever we want. It could be about Bob's Burgers. It could be about something else. If anyone wants to say something, ask a question, make a comment, feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'll end the video sooner rather than later. No questions? All right. Well, in that case, we are going to say good night then. Thank you for joining me. And come back on Friday when we edit this down to a more, oh, hey, Ryan, how you doing? It's like, I guess I'll hold off for a moment since my buddy Ryan is in the house. I know you probably want to ask me about the Chip and Dale movie. I would hold off, though, because we are going to be doing a podcast tomorrow live with someone else who's also seen the movie, and we are going to discuss the Chip and Dale movie at that point. So, yeah. Yeah, well, it doesn't have to end. If you have any questions, we can just talk about things. I'm just not going to talk about the Chip and Dale movie very much, other than to say I definitely have some pretty mixed feelings about it. Oh, doing okay. Doing okay. Just living life the best I can after the unexpected layoff from a couple weeks ago. But, I've got I've got savings, I've got side gigs. Unemployment's going to be much more generous than I expected it to be. So, provided this doesn't drag out for like a year or more, we should be fine. And now I just have time to make more videos. I mean, heck, it's because I don't have to get up early that I'm able to do this live stream. Barbecue sauce. So, anyway, yeah. Yeah, and also me and my wife are up to Alice in Wonderland in our Disney movie marathon. Yesterday we watched The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad and Cinderella. So we have made it through the compilation generation, and now we are back to regular movies again. So the Cinderella Blu-ray actually had like an introduction for the Walt Disney Family Museum, and that's when Katie said that she's never been there. So I guess we will have to go to the Walt Disney Family Museum sometime this summer, probably on that weekend that we'll be visiting my brother in San Francisco. Then I might take her to that museum. All right, well, if that's the end of the questions, we will probably end it there. But thank you all for joining, and I will catch you later.